Alright guys, so we are going to continue looking at factoring, and today we're going to look at factoring trinomials with a greatest common factor and a leading coefficient that's going to be something other than the number 1. So let's kind of talk about what that means, and let's start by just going through kind of step by step what that's going to look like. So step number 1 is still going to be kind of simple. We're going to find the two numbers that multiply to be a times c and that add to be b. And so that really hasn't changed. That's still the same as it was before. So as an example, if we had 2x squared plus 7x plus 3, where a is 2, b is 7, c is 3, so remember those numbers go in order. Then if you take a multiplied by c, that's the first number, multiplied by the last number, 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, and b is just 7. So we need to find the two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be 7, which really shouldn't be too hard to do. Those two numbers are going to be positive 6 and positive 1. Obviously 6 multiplied by 1 is 6, and 6 plus 1 is 7. Step number 2, we're going to split the middle term into the two integers that we found in step number 1, which is going to give us 4 terms. Make sure that we put an x after each of them. So again, if our original expression was 2x squared plus 7x plus 3, then what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this by saying that 7x is really just the same as 6x plus 1x. Which if you think about it, should kind of make sense. 6x plus 1x is 7x. So really we're just breaking it apart. Then we'll go ahead and copy down our other two terms. So we'll copy down our 2x squared and we'll copy down our 3. All right, so step number 3. Now we're just going to factor this by grouping. If you notice, now we've got something that has 4 terms. And remember, anytime we have 4 terms, that's our clue to factor by grouping. So remember that in factoring by grouping, we're going to split those terms into 2 groups. The first group will be the 2x squared and the 6x. The second group will be the 1x and the plus 3. So for our first group, 2x squared plus 6x, both of those are divisible by 2. They also both have x, so we'll factor out a 2x. When we do that, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and x squared divided by x is just x. And then for 6x, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and x divided by itself is just 1, so that'll leave us with x plus 3 inside the parentheses. For our second group of terms, 1x plus 3, in this case, really there's nothing we can divide them both by. And when that's the case, we're still going to have to put a 1 as the greatest common factor. So if there is nothing else to divide by, you can at least always divide by 1 or sometimes negative 1, but in this case positive 1. So that's going to be our greatest common factor. That means that they're not really going to change. There's still going to be a 1x and a plus 3. And then remember for step 4, now that we've done our factoring by grouping, we now have a common binomial of x plus 3, which we are going to factor out. And that'll leave us with 2x and a positive 1 for our second set of parentheses. So as you can see, quite a few steps to this type of factoring. Obviously, this is probably the most difficult type of factoring, and so this is kind of what you're going to have to do if nothing else kind of works. Now, there is going to be a slightly shorter way to do it, which I'll show you after we've done a couple examples of this. But let's go ahead and do a couple more examples using this full method so we can kind of see how this works. So the next one we're going to have is 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. So again, we're going to start by setting up our diagram here. We're going to start by taking a multiplied by c. 2 multiplied by 3 is 6. And then remember, b is going to go underneath. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be positive 5. Which again shouldn't take too long. Hopefully positive 2 and positive 3 should work. So that would be 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, and 2 plus 3 is 5. Those are going to be the two numbers that we will use to split apart our middle term. So we'll rewrite 5x as 2x plus 3x. Again, the other two terms we're just going to copy down. And now we should have 4 terms, and we should be ready to factor by grouping. So we've got our first group and second group. Let's take a look at our first group of terms, 2x squared plus 2x. Both are divisible by 2. They both also have x in common, so we'll factor out 2x. So then 2 divided by 2 is 1. X squared divided by x is just x. So that'll leave us with just x for our first term. And then 2 divided by 2 is 1. X divided by x is 1. So our second term is just going to be a plus 1. Next, let's look at our second group of terms, 3x plus 3. Both of those are divisible, obviously, by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so that's 1x. And 3 divided by 3 is also 1. So that'll leave us with x plus 1 inside the parentheses. So now here comes our common binomial. We've got x plus 1, which can be factored out. And that will leave us with 2x and a plus 3 for our second parentheses. And there are our factors. Okay. Let's do one more kind of this long way, and then I'll show you a much shorter way that you can work through these types of problems. So we've got 5x squared minus 17x plus 6. So again, start by a times c. 5 multiplied by 6 is 30. And then we'll copy down b, which is negative 17. So we need numbers that multiply to be 30, add to be negative 17. So again, if we need to, we can list out the numbers that multiply to be 30. So that's 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. And to get a negative 17, it looks like the pair of numbers we could use would be 2 and 15 if we make it negative 2, and negative 15. That way it's negative 17. Okay, so let's use negative 2 and negative 15. Those will be what we'll use to split apart our middle terms. So negative 2x and negative 15x. And then we'll go ahead and copy down our 5x squared. Copy down our positive 6. All right, so now that we've got 4 terms, here's where we'll group those up. In our first group of terms, 5x squared minus 2x. 5 and 2, obviously you cannot divide, but x squared and x, you can at least factor out an x from both of those terms. So that'll leave you with 5x for the first term. And when you factor out an x, that'll leave you with just the minus 2 for the second term. Now for our second group of terms, for minus 15x and a plus 6, both of those are divisible by 3. Again, since it's a minus 15, let's make sure we factor out a minus 3. So now, negative 15 divided by negative 3 is positive 5, so that's 5x. And then 6 divided by negative 3 is a minus 2, so there's our second term. At this point, our two parentheses match one another, so let's factor out that common binomial of 5x minus 2. And then we'll go ahead and copy down what's left over, which is a positive x minus 3. All right, so let me show you another way that you can work through these problems that'll save you a little bit of time. It still does take a little bit longer, but I think it's a much faster way that still gives you the correct answer as well. So let's take a look at it for this example, 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. You're going to start it the exact same way. So you're still going to start this with the diagram. You're going to take 6 multiplied by negative 4, and that's negative 24. And then you'll copy down your minus 5 for the bottom of the diagram. So we still need to find numbers that multiply to be negative 24 and add to be negative 5. So again, if you need to, feel free to list out those numbers. 1 and negative 24, negative 1 and positive 24, 2 and 12, or as opposed to negative 12. One of them has to be negative. So negative 2 and positive 12, 3 and negative 8, negative 3 and positive 8, 4 and negative 6, and finally negative 4 and positive 6. Okay, so going through and adding those numbers together, 1 plus negative 24 is negative 23. Negative 1 plus 24 is going to then be positive 23. 2 plus negative 12 is negative 10. Negative 2 plus 12 then would be positive 10. 3 plus negative 8 is negative 5, and at that point we can stop. We know that it's going to be positive 3 and negative 8. All right, so now here's the shortcut. Here's what you can do. We're going to take our first term, this 6, and we're going to put it above each of those two numbers. So we're going to put it above the 3, and we're going to put it above the negative 8. We're then going to look to see if there's a common factor that we can divide out on both sides. So on the left side, between the 6 and the 3, both of those are divisible by 3. If we take 6 and divide by 3, that's 2. And if we take 3 and divide by 3, that's 1. So then one of our factors is going to be 2x plus 1. So what you'll do is the number on top becomes the number in front of x, and the number underneath will just come after it. For our second parentheses, let's do the same thing on the right side. For 6 and negative 8, both of those are divisible by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So then our second parentheses is going to be 3x minus 4. And at that point, we are done. Now, if you don't like that method, then just go back and keep working them the way we did these first two. So use those two numbers of 3 and negative 8 to split apart your middle two term. Do your factoring by grouping. But I do think that this method is quite a bit quicker than the method that I first showed you. So let's do another example of it. In fact, let's continue using it and see if it makes a little bit of sense, because I do think it is quite a bit quicker. So again, you'll always start the same way. Take a multiplied by c. 12 multiplied by negative 5 is negative 60. And copy down your middle term, which is 11. So we need numbers that multiply to be 60 and add to be 11. So let's see. If we want to list those numbers out, we've got 1 and negative 60, which adds to be negative 59. So that won't work. Let's see. We've got negative 1 and positive 60, which add to be positive 59, so that won't work. We've got 2 and negative 30, which add to be negative 28, so that won't work. Let's see, negative 2 and positive 30 is positive 28, so not going to help. We've got 3 and 20, so I guess we can make that 3 and negative 20, that's negative 27, so nope. How about negative 3 and positive 20? Those add to be positive 20, or positive 17. So let me change this. Should have been negative 17. Either way, still was not going to be what we wanted. So negative 17 or positive 17, that's not going to work. How about 4 and negative 15? That's going to end up adding to be negative 11. So we're getting closer. How about negative 4 and positive 15? And yes, those should add to be positive 11. So those are going to be our two numbers that we're going to want to use. So again, negative 4 and positive 15. All right, so now here's the new step that we did on the last problem. We're going to take our number that was in front, which was 12, and put it above each of those two numbers. So now we're going to simplify on either side as if we possibly can. On the left side, 12 and negative 4 are both divisible by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. and negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. So one of our parentheses is going to be 3x and a minus 1. Next, on the right side, 12 and 15 are both divisible by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So our second parentheses is going to be 4x and a positive 5. So that'll be a plus 5. And we're done. So again, pretty quick. Really, the only thing that we have to kind of spend a little bit of time on is this list of numbers, which obviously, if you are quicker at finding the numbers that multiply to be negative 16 add to be 11, that can obviously go quite a bit quicker. Unfortunately, sometimes that does take a little bit of time. Okay, let's look at two more examples of this just to make sure it makes sense, and then we will be ready to look at some examples with the greatest common factor, and we'll be done. All right, so this next example, we've got 8x squared minus 10x plus 3. Again, we'll start the exact same way that we have on every other problem. A times c is 24. Copy down b underneath your diagram, so that's negative 10. So we need numbers that multiply to be 24, add to be negative 10. Okay, so looking at those numbers, we've got 1 and 24, which obviously adds to be 25, so that won't work. Negative 1 and negative 24 is going to add to be negative 25, so that won't work either. Next, we could take 2 multiplied by 12 to get 24, but adding those together, we get 14. And if we do negative 2 and negative 12, those add to be negative 14. Next, we could try 3 and positive 8. Those would add to be 11, so we got a little bit closer. How about negative 3 and negative 8? Well, those add to be negative 11, so not going to be that. Next would be 4 and 6. 4 multiplied by 6 is 24. And if you add those together, you get positive 10. So I think if we make them both negative 4 and negative 6 obviously multiply to be 24. And they do, in fact, add to be negative 10. So let's go ahead and use that pair of numbers first. So again, we're going to use negative 4 and negative 6. Now let's take our number in front and put it above each of those. So looking at our left side for 8 and negative 4, both of those are divisible by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. So our first parentheses is going to be 2x minus 1. Next, for 8 and the 6, both of those are divisible by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So our second parentheses is going to be 4x minus 3. And then we are done. All right, last example. Let's take a look at it here. So we've got 6x squared plus x minus 12. So again, we'll start the exact same way. Take a multiplied by c, that's negative 72. And then copy down b. Since there's not a number there, we'll assume it's a 1. So we need numbers that multiply to be 72 and add to be positive 1. So obviously we've got 1 and negative 72, but that's going to be way too big. Next is negative 1 and 72, and again, those are going to be too big of numbers. They add to be negative 71 and positive 71, so not going to work. Okay, so then I guess we've got 2 and negative 36, which adds to be negative 34. So then negative 2 and positive 36 would add to be positive 34, so those won't work either. Next is 3 and negative 24. Those add to be negative 21, so that won't work. And then negative 3 and positive 24 is positive 21, so nope. So we're going to keep getting a little bit bigger each time with our numbers and hopefully get it closer and closer to positive 1. 4 multiplied by negative 18. So when you add those is negative 14. If you switch them around, negative 4 and positive 18 will be positive 14, so still no luck. Next, let's see, 6 and 12. So that would be 6 multiplied by negative 12. And that adds to be negative 6. Or negative 6 and positive 12. That adds to be positive 6. So we're getting a little bit closer. About 8 and negative 9. Well, that adds to be negative 1. So I think to get positive 1, if we switch those around, negative 8 and positive 9, obviously multiply to be negative 72. And they do, in fact, add to be 1. So let's use negative 8 and positive 9. So we'll go ahead and put 6, which is our first term, above each of those two numbers. And let's see what we can do to simplify. On the left side, 6 and negative 8 are both divisible by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So our first parentheses is going to be 3x minus 4. For our right side, 6 and 9 are both divisible by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So that'll be 2x plus 3, and we're done. Okay. So now, what happens if there's a greatest common factor? Well, let's see. So first, let's factor out our greatest common factor, and then we'll go ahead and factor our trinomial. So we've got 10x squared plus 75x plus 35. So looking at those numbers, pretty clearly they're all divisible by 5. So let's factor out a 5 first. 10 divided by 5 is 2, so that's 2x squared. 75 divided by 5 is 15, so that's 15x. And 35 divided by 5 is 7, so that's a plus 7. So now let's continue to factor with what's inside of our parentheses. So again, using the method that we've been using all of today, we'll take a multiplied by c, so 2 multiplied by 7, which is 14. And then we'll copy down b underneath of it, which is 15. So now we need to find numbers that multiply to be 14, add to be 15. So for 14 and 15, we can start with 1 and 14, which actually is going to be the pair of numbers that we want. So that was kind of nice. 1 plus 14 is 15. So those are going to be the two numbers that we will use. So we've got 1 and 14. Next, we'll take our number in front of x squared, which was 2, and we'll put it above each of those numbers and see what we can do to simplify. On the left side, 2 and 1, there's nothing we can divide out. And so I don't know that we've seen this before, but if there's nothing we divide out, then that's just going to be one of our factors. So that's going to be 2x and a plus 1. On the right side, though, 2 and 14 are both divisible by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So our other set of parentheses is going to be 1x plus 7. Now remember, for your final answer, you do need to make sure that you still include that greatest common factor that you factored out at the beginning. But then at that point, we are done. So really, all the same process, the only difference being dividing that number out at the beginning. And I think that that's pretty straightforward. All right, let's take a look at one last example, and that'll be it for today. So we've got 6x squared minus 9x minus 27. So looking at all of our terms, looking at the numbers in particular, 6, negative 9, and negative 27 are all divisible by 3. So let's factor that 3 out. 6 divided by 3 is 2, so that's 2x squared. Negative 9 divided by 3 is going to be a minus 3, so minus 3x. And 27 divided by 3 is 9, so that'll be a minus 9. So now let's look at what's left inside of our parentheses. We've got 2x squared minus 3x minus 9. So we'll start by taking a multiplied by c, which is negative 18. And then we'll copy down b, which is negative 3. So let's look for those numbers that multiply to be negative 18 and add to be 3. Or add to be negative 3, rather. So we've got 1 multiplied by negative 18. That adds to be 17. And so the negative 1 and positive 18 would add to be a positive 17. The first one should have been negative 17. Either way, not going to work. Next, we'll have 2 and negative 9. Those will add to be negative 7. So then negative 2 and positive 9, those will add to be positive 7. Next up, we would have 3 and negative 6. Those do, in fact, add to be negative 3. So there's going to be our two numbers that we're going to want to use. So again, 3 and negative 6. Next, we'll take our number in front of x squared, which is 2, put it above each of those two numbers, and look to see if you can simplify. On the left side, we can't simplify, so that'll still just stay as 2x plus 3. But for the right side, 2 and negative 6 are both divisible by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So that'll be 1x minus 3 for our second parentheses. All that's left, make sure and copy down that greatest common factor that you had at the very beginning, and you're done. So you can see this method of factoring does take a little bit more time, but again, the quicker you can find those numbers that multiply to be the number on top and add to be the number on bottom, really that's what takes the longest. The faster you can get at finding that pair of numbers, the quicker that factoring goes. Obviously, we saw two different types. If you are someone that likes to show all of the work, split the middle, and do your grouping, those first two examples might be more for you, but I do think that the method I showed you in those last few examples is really going to be quicker and something that would be worth your time to practice. But it's up to you in the end. Whichever one makes the most sense for you is obviously the one that you need to continue to do. Next time, we will take a look at how you can factor some special types of factoring. So we'll look at what's called the difference of squares, and then we will look at some more of kind of just mixed review, looking at all different types of problems and knowing how to factor each of them. Until then, have a good rest of your day.